Manitoba's fastest-growing newscast, Prairie Pulse.
I'm Martin Boroditsky. Today, the Premier and the opposition leaders respond to the New Brunswick-Meech Lake proposals.
I'm Joanne Berrien. The owner of Raggedy Ann Day Nursery says she's been treated unfairly by the provincial daycare office.
And the Auditor General releases his annual report on how the government is spending our tax dollars.
Now with the details, Ted Deller.
Good evening, everyone. A New Brunswick Legislature Committee has concluded tonight that changes are needed in the Meech Lake Accord, but it stops short of saying whether the accord should be scrapped if changes are not made. The committee says Meech Lake should be amended to protect women's rights and linguistic minorities, and it accepts the definition of Quebec as a distinct society. In Ottawa, Federal Provincial Relations Minister Lowell Murray says he's pleased with that acceptance. He says the report seems to leave New Brunswick Premier Frank McKenna with room to negotiate on the accord. Meanwhile, though, Murray took issue with Prince Edward Island Premier Joe Giz, who says the Meech Lake Accord is dead and will have to be renegotiated from scratch.
Premier Giz saw the Manitoba report, or heard about it, came to the conclusion that the proposals of Manitoba were so far-reaching that they would meant the death of Meech Lake. He seems to be assuming that that Manitoba is throwing this on the table as an ultimatum and saying take it or leave it. He is assuming that there is no flexibility, no give whatever in the Manitoba position. I don't think that it is prudent to assume that.
Manitoba's political leaders responded to the New Brunswick proposals today at the legislature. As Martin Boroditsky reports, they still advocate cooperation, but they have differing views on whether there are signs Manitoba's concerns, as well as those of New Brunswick, can actually be met.
Premier Gary Filmon was cautious in his response to the New Brunswick proposals on Meech Lake. He felt there were some areas of common concern, but needed time to study the document.
As I've indicated before, I certainly will take the time to read it and give it the careful consideration it deserves. That's what I asked of other First Ministers yesterday when we tabled the Manitoba report. And I'm not going to begin to make commentary on details of it. I think these are things that we ought to sit down and discuss.
NDP leader Gary Doer took a more direct approach than Premier Filmon in responding to the New Brunswick initiatives. He felt that although the New Brunswick government thinks they are taking a moderate approach, in point of fact, they have let down many citizens of New Brunswick by not addressing their very real concerns about the Meech Lake Accord.
Other changes, the full protection of the Charter, some recognition of Canada's First People that always are left behind with every constitutional report, and the ability to have a flexible amending formula for Senate reform, I think is regrettable they're not in the document. And I think this document is helpful for some of the positions of Manitoba, but not helpful for all the concerns we've heard across Canada, not just in Manitoba.
Liberal leader Sharon Carstairs shared Doer's concern that New Brunswick Premier Frank McKenna did not wish to challenge Quebec. Carstairs did see some change in the attitude of Senator Lowell Murray, who is Prime Minister Mulroney's advisor on Meech Lake. Mrs. Carstairs, Mr. Murray characterized the idea that something could be worked out as being in the league of a miracle. Don't you feel that that reflects perhaps a negative attitude?
Well, Mr. Murray has been negative almost from the very beginning. The fact that he moved at all yesterday and said that, there may be some grounds for some discussions is about the most open comment we've had from Senator Murray since the signature was put on the document by the Prime Minister in June of 1987.
Martin Boroditsky, Prairie Pulse.
Well, the unusual cooperation between the three parties on the Meech Lake Task Force here has resulted in a positive reaction from a group representing 9 women's organizations. The Charter of Rights Coalition feels the concerns they raised at the public hearings on Meech Lake last spring were included within the report. However, spokesperson Jerry Bjornson says the threat posed to women under the Distinct Society Clause will need a compromise Quebec may not be willing to make.
And I think that the whole question in Quebec about individual rights over and above group rights will come up around this. That if there's a sense that in order to promote, a Francophone society, they have to squash individual rights, I think there's an acceptance among some in Quebec to do that. So I think they will be as strongly against inclusion of the Charter as they will be against getting rid of the Distinct Society Clause.